You're tuned into Holy Smokes, Cigars, Catholicism, and Conversation. Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense. I'm your host, Dustin Quick, and this is episode number 60, The Catholic Approach to Redemptive Suffering. Now, before I introduce tonight's guest, I just want to say a word about my sponsor, Havana Palace, on Huron Church Road in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. For the best service and finest cigars, go see Caesar and Eli, and they will hook you up. Let them know that you heard about Havana Palace from this podcast. Family owned and operated, wonderful place. They treat all their customers like family, including my own. So please give them a visit. Go to their Facebook page, facebook.com/Havana Palace, and give them a like. We would all greatly appreciate it. So guys, first of all, I want to apologize. I'm running a bit behind schedule tonight. So
you're not behind schedule at all, dude. It's Kaiser Standard Time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, gotcha. They're even saying it in the chat. Hallelujah! Someone should have told Dustin about Kaiser Standard Time.
Is that what KST is? Okay.
KST, okay. Man, that's how we roll, dude.
All right, yeah. I'm switching from EST to KST.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about redemptive suffering this evening, and we're going to do so. We're going to say a word about it, the teaching itself, the reality itself, and then we're going to go into your testimony, just, sort of how you grew up, start from your earliest memories, what your faith life was like, sort of the roads and the turns and the twists that you took throughout your life, and how you ultimately got to where you are today, and what role redemptive suffering has played in that journey, in that transformation process. So that's how we're going to kind of do this tonight, guys. So again, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your time, and we hope that you'll be very blessed by this episode.
I didn't know, you didn't let me know ahead of time that this was like the telethon episode that's going to be about 24 hours long, and that we're just gonna you're like, start from your earliest memory and tell about your suffering, and I'm like, okay, I didn't realize we were going to be going a long time, brother.
Well,
yeah, so, no, that's good.
If you want to keep any parts, particularly short, by all means, brother, go right ahead.
I'm good at being pithy. I'm not very wordy.
Okay, pithy is good. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, redemptive suffering. I want you, if you could, to share a quote from Scripture for us to start unpacking it.
Yeah, I'll actually read it from two different versions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One of them are my two favorite. My favorite to study and my favorite to read. The original and true Douay Reims. And I've heard that I've actually been pronouncing Reims wrong, but it seems to be the way colloquially people say it. I've heard it said like Reigns or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard Reims too.
Yeah, Douay Reims. New Testament, Anno Domini, 1582. This is the Bad Man Pajama, part of the 4-volume set. Massive amounts of annotations. But the Epistle of Paul to the Colossians, chapter 1, verse 24, who now rejoice in suffering for you, and do accomplish those things that want of the passions of Christ in my flesh for his body, which is the church. And he's talking about redemptive suffering, but I want to read it from this one too. This is the Knox version here.
Okay.
The Knox Bible. And I like how he phrases it. Readability is just wonderful with it. Even as I write, I am glad of my suffering on your behalf, as in this mortal frame of mine, I help to pay off the debt which the afflictions of Christ still leave to be paid for the sake of his body, the church. And I love it because he's glad for it. He's glad for his suffering on others' behalf. So, I mean, it's happening to him, but he's grateful for the suffering on their behalf in his mortal frame. So he's keeping in mind memento mori all the time. And then he's helping to pay off the debt which the afflictions of Christ still leave to be paid, which is, of course, that's a thorn in the side of a lot of heretics. They're like, how dare you? And you're like, well, Paul talks about that. Yeah. And for the sake of his body, the church. And so it's awesome to be part of that with the Lord, in fact, to be afflicted as he was, to be loathed and hated as he was. And so, yeah, so that's Colossians 1:24.
Okay, and I'm going to read a quote from Saint Faustina on redemptive suffering. And the Lord said to me, my child, you please me most by suffering, in your physical as well as your mental sufferings. My daughter, do not seek sympathy from creatures. I want the fragrance of your suffering to be pure and unadulterated. I want you to detach yourself not only from creatures, but also from yourself. The more you will come to love suffering, my daughter, the purer your love will be for me.
Mhm.
You know, Catholics, we talk a lot about sufferings, and you know, the whole thing with Protestants, right? Why do you guys have a crucifix? Jesus isn't on the cross anymore, right? But what more of a pure source can we get about redemptive suffering than Holy Scripture? I mean, St. Paul talks about it. And he doesn't just say, and rejoice in suffering for his own sake, but he suffers for the sake of others.
Mhm.
And what's that whole thing about what is lacking in Christ's afflictions? If Christ paid the all sufficient price for our sins, even one drop of his precious blood is enough to cover all the sins of humanity. How can we possibly say, in what context can we say that there's something lacking? What is that all about?
Mhm. I thought it was interesting because as I said, the Due has annotations, lots and lots of them. This version, this particular version that they call the original and true. But it says here in the annotations on the side and the margin, it says there's no want in Christ's passions, which he suffered in himself as head, but there is want in those passions of Christ, which he daily suffereth in his body, the church, and the members thereof. And it talks about how Christ's merits are applied to us without any injury to his death, and that the works of one may satisfy for another. And I just wanted to read this here, talking about. Let's see here. Let me go to the beginning of this. Let's see. Not only those passages which he suffered in himself, which were fully ended in his death, and were in themselves fully sufficient for the redemption of the world and remission of sins, but all those which his body and members suffer are his also, and of him they receive the condition, quality, and force to be meritorious and satisfactory. For there, for though there be no insufficiency in the actions or passions of Christ the head, yet his wisdom will and justice requireth and ordaineth that his body and members should be fellows of his passions, as they look to be fellows of his glory, that so suffering with him and by his example, they may apply to themselves and others the general medicine of Christ's merits and satisfactions, as it is effectually also applied to us by sacraments, sacrifice, and other ways also. And so he talks about how it's to through the communion of saints that this happens, and the society that is not only between the head and the body, but also between one member and another, are not only satisfactory in many ways profitable for the sufferers themselves, but also for other their fellow members in Christ. For though one member cannot merit for another properly, yet may one bear the burden and discharge the debt of another, both by the law of God and nature. And of course, they then talk about the ridiculous heresy of Wycliffe, and so yeah, and so it's and that's one of the reasons if you just miss hearing language in commentaries and stuff like that about the heretics and the blasphemers and all that, you need to pick up this version. It's loaded with it, and so, um, but yeah, I mean the idea that God is using the things that we endure and go through, not only for our own benefit by His design, but also for the benefit of other people, and that we can even offer it for their intentions.
Mhm.
That we and even things as simple as being sick,
Yeah,
that you may feel under the weather, and think of just the way that the framework of mind that people all of a sudden think differently about suffering, that when they're going through it, instead of just the oh me, oh my kind of pity party thing, that instead they actually are thinking about other people and saying there's people much worse off than myself. And that's a lesson I learned even in, especially, actually not even just even, especially in the darkest and most difficult sufferings of my life. I learned that there were others, and that those others were suffering worse, and that I could point to them and say, man, as much as I want to say, why, Lord, why is this happening to me? Instead, I can look around and go, wow, it to be, quite frank, I'm really glad it's not that. That's
no kidding.
worse.
Yeah,
But that gives me a reason to offer up even those sufferings I do have for them.
yeah, yeah. And you know, we can say that Christ redeems all of creation. He creates a new heavens and a new earth. But he doesn't do it alone because, as you said, he is united to his members. There is one head and one body. The total Christ is actually head and members. And if we look at Romans 8, we see how St. Paul talks about creation groaning and awaiting the glorious liberty of the children of God. So what we go through united to Christ actually has a role in restoring not only our glory and the glory of others, but creation itself. And redemptive suffering is one of those ways that, subjectively speaking, the merits of Christ's passion, death, resurrection, and ascension get applied to us, to others, and creation as a whole in its ultimate renewal. So it's very powerful. And for me, redemptive suffering is something that's uniquely a Catholic distinctive. If you look at how other Christians maybe view suffering, you don't find such a, not only is it's beautiful in the intellectual sense, but it really has transformative power. When you take this upon yourself, when you pick up this cross and you actually apply it to your life, and you witness the graces that come not only in your life and the lives of others that you know, and you know what, perhaps even somewhere across the world somebody receives those graces from God through your suffering offered up in union with Christ. You might get to heaven one day and somebody will come up to you that you'd never seen in your life and say, you know what, thank you for offering up your sufferings because it's through them that I got here. And that's powerful, because we can take even the smallest, like you said, the smallest thing, sickness, even if you stub your toe, whatever it is, you can take anything and you can lay it upon the altar. You can say, Lord, in union with your cross, please apply this to, X, Y, and Z's intentions, or just somebody who needs it. You might not mention anybody specifically, but just know that those graces are flowing from the head through the neck, the most holy Mother of God, to the individual members of the church. And you might have, in a very real sense, you might have a role in somebody's eternal destiny that you don't even know.
It's a form of prayer. I mean, if you think about it, here's an example of offering up your sufferings, a really simple one in a way, that let's say your child is going through miserable things, and it's somebody who's alive, right? Your child's going through terrible, miserable things, not doing well in their life, and you find yourself enormously grieved to the point where your heart aches, your mind is just, you're renting the clothes, you're throwing the ashes into the sky, you're all sorts of upset. And instead of lashing out, you offer those sufferings to God. You get on your knees and you pray, and you offer your sufferings through your prayers as incense to God, and say, I'm offering them for them, instead of the pity for me, just be with me, help me through this. That suffering, in fact, drives you forward to offer that person's name and offer their lives and their hearts up to the Lord, and to cry out for the Lord to help them, right? And of course, it helps you too, in a way. I mean, it gives you the assurance that this is not in vain, what's going on, that there's a purpose for this, and that this could destroy you. This could annihilate you. It could leave you off, floundering in an ocean of worries and concerns. But instead, it's centered you, and it's put you in the right position in life, and that is on your knees crying out to God. And so you say, there it is, redemptive suffering. And it's helping you. For when you're praying, you're praying, you're deepening your faith, you're deepening your assurance and trust in God, and you're postured properly in the world, right? Rather than being defiant or being angry or cynical, that instead you're being hopeful and optimistic and placing your trust where it ought to be, and that is in the hands of a God of providence. And so, even in just the basic thing. So and people do that all the time. And it's just one example of it, and saying you're basically transforming other sufferings into prayer. And you're praying when you do that anyway. If you're sitting there and you're going through sufferings and you're like, God, this really hurts right now, it's a terrible thing, and I'm going through this pain, and I'm going through this loss, and I'm going through this tragedy, and I'm offering it up that you can do with it as you please. You're in the same place.
Yeah.
You're doing the same, you're fundamentally the same thing, and you're praying. So yes, and that's transformative,
Yeah.
not only for you, but for other people.
Yeah. And it rightly orders your relationship not only to God but to neighbor, and then in doing so you fulfill the whole of the law.
Yeah.
So this places you there. It's not just a me and Jesus thing. Our relationship with others is very real, and this is probably one of the most profound ways that you can see that in context and at work. It's really, to me, it's really an evidence of the divine origin of the church to take something as absurd as suffering and not only give you tools to endure it, but to actually bring good out of it.
Mhm.
And all we have to do, the supreme example of that is the sacrifice of Christ, and how he was scourged, beaten, mocked, spit upon, rejected, killed. But ultimately, that's not where the story ends. The resurrection and the ascension follow. And so too, that should be the pattern of our life. And
Mhm.
we'll probably only see the full fruits of that on the other side of the veil, God willing. So that's a little primer on redemptive suffering. So,
Yeah.
Jeremiah, what I'd like for you to do is, I want to hear about your spiritual journey. So
Mhm.
start from whatever point you feel is relevant and just kind of take us through that, and highlight, if you could, particular moments of suffering and what you did with that. How did you navigate that, and how ultimately do you think it was used by the Lord for not only your good, the good of your family, but for the good of others? If you could do that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say this before we move on. I wanted to say I got these cigars. I've been encouraged not to say how I got them because there's a guy he's like I don't want people coming to me wanting cigars all the time, but send me some cigars, and so I have their Regina cigars,
Oh,
and
beautiful, beautiful.
yeah, and today I'm smoking Nativitas. And
Ah,
so and it's got really, really beautiful images on the wraps as well. And I have two others here. I have Gabriel. Okay. So I've got
mm.
Gabriel and I have Mater Dei.
Oh
Okay.
wow,
And
that's
so
beautiful.
I've got three different ones as part of a COVID package, actually.
There you go.
We thought I had COVID, and they're like, I got you, Stan. I'm like, okay. I'm thinking it's like ivermectin or something in the mail. Get it, it's a bunch of cigars. I'm like, the COVID package. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so I'm really grateful for it, and it's actually been a long time, but it tastes good, so I'm hoping that it's fine. You'll find out if it's not. I'm like tomorrow. I'm like, I'll just offer that suffering up too.
Yeah, there
So
you go.
the, the earliest suffering that I remember, in fact, one of the earliest memories that I have is I was in a hospital, and I don't really have any idea of how this was redemptive in this sense. I've never thought about it, but it is the early. In fact, it is the earliest memory that I have, and that is that there was I had issues, right? Bathroom issues as a kid, and a little anal retentive, and ended up herniating. I ended up having a hernia, and I remember this vivid memory of being in this kind of crib in a hospital, and nurses trying to get me, and I'm scampering around all over the place trying to get away from them, and they finally grabbed me, and I'm screaming, "Help me!" And they put me on this bed, and they put the mask on me, and that's the next thing I know, it's dreamland. And I wake up, and I climb out of bed. It's late. I'm on the TV. There's a glowing screen, and it's got like Mighty Mouse or something on it. And I crawl out of the bed. I'm kind of sneaking like a ninja, thinking maybe I can bust out of this hospital or something. I don't know what I was thinking, where I thought I was going. But then I realized I had to go to the bathroom, and went there and realized that because of the surgery on my belly button, right, it was right under my belly button, that it was taped, and I was wearing essentially a diaper. And they were like, what are you doing up? You need to just go in your diaper. And I'm like, no, I didn't want to do that, but I had to. And but it was, even that, it was something that I learned, that even though I didn't understand suffering at that time, And some of it was self-inflicted. Some
Mhm.
of it was, it was fears that were irrational or things that could have been done differently, that it ended up being suffering involved in that. Um, but it was something that ultimately led to a greater sense of health, to a greater sense, less fear in dealing with this. So even as a kid, even in something completely detached from, approaching this in a way that was cognizant of redemptive suffering or anything like that, it was in fact in many ways redemptive in my life. That there were things in my life that through this process I learned to trust other people, and that sometimes, you gotta go poop. Sometimes you gotta go. I mean, how would we stand before the throne of the Lord if we didn't do that? And so, we have to be able to do that. So I learned everybody poops. Yeah. So I have that. There was a story, um, when I was really young. My dad was a trucker, and he'd be gone a lot, and my mom, it was me, I'm the oldest of three. He had my sister, she's in the middle. My sister, by the way, just so people know, please offer up your prayers and suffering for her. In fact, she's dying of cancer. She's
I'm so sorry.
stage 4. She's had it for 5 years. They gave her a year. She's lived for 5, but she's pretty much at the place where it's become quite evident that the options that were helping her all of this time they're worn out, right? They're not doing what they were doing for years, and there's no more. She doesn't know, so she's now resorted to chemo, radiation, things that she didn't do for 5 years. She did alternative treatments of various kinds, even going to Mexico for things that she couldn't get here. And she's done a remarkable job. But she has 4 children, and so please pray for her. She's the middle child of our family. So is me, my sister, and my brother, and my mom. And so I would watch as my mom would take care of us every day, but my dad was gone, and he'd be gone for sometimes weeks at a time, trucking, right? And so being a trucker's son, you spend a lot of time with mom, you spend a lot of time alone. And it was a sad thing, and I was always excited when I'd see him come home. And there was one night I remember um him coming home, and it was a stormy night. It was real crazy, man. Like, crazy rain outside, big huge puddles all over the place. We're in this small town called Dillsburg in Pennsylvania, in this farmhouse, old farmhouse. And he drove this 62 Caddy. And so it was one of those that was in good condition but needed a paint job desperately bad. And so you can hear that bugger coming down the road, the glug 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 glug. You could hear it. And my dad, he comes rolling up, man, and I could hear him. And so I run to the windowsill. I'm on the second floor of this house, and I'm looking out the window at this rain and everything, and I see my dad come out. And I was too young to process this, but there was a dude at our church. We were Church of God Pentecostal, and it was a guy at the church that asked if he could take our family out for ice cream after church. And the guy, he was non-threatening in the way that many people might think of right off the bat. In fact, it's a good possibility, I think, that he was gay. So I don't think he was into my mom. And I think that later they found that out and stuff about him. But he brings my family out for ice cream, and afterward drops us all off, because you got a wife or woman and 3 kids carrying him around and everything, and he knew who my dad was. Well,
Yeah.
he's inside the house. I'm not even processing this and what could possibly come of this. And I go to the edge of the stairs, and I'm so excited about seeing my dad, right? Because I hadn't seen him in weeks. And I'm sitting at the top of the stairs. So I'm kind of a little nervous to go downstairs and stuff. And I'm seeing shadows cast on the wall. And all of a sudden, the door opens up. And next thing I know, I'm hearing crazy swear words, like lots and lots and lots of swear words, lots of anger. What are you doing here? And fury. My mom, Tim, put him down. And my dad, the guy's screaming, he's like, I wasn't doing anything. And you hear him go outside. And so I run back over to the window, and I look, and I see my dad carrying this guy by the back of he had a suit, this kind of maroon suit, and he is grabbing him. And the guy's like Ichabod Crane. His arms are waving all over the place, and he chucks him right into this massive puddle. The guy falls into it, mud all over, gets up, flying around, falling down, gets up and runs, and comes back in. And my mom, of course, is devastated. My mom is furious about this. And my dad, of course, is furious. And they're going back and forth. And that entire time, when I heard that jalopy, when I heard that car coming down the road, I anticipated that I was going to be able to spend time finally with my dad. That we'd go out and finally be able to go by the creek in the backyard to go find that bullfrog that was always making noise. And so that's what I thought. I thought we were going to have a great time together. And my dad was yelling, and it felt like all of a sudden the whole house shook. This major sound, frightening sound. And my mom gasped. And the last words I heard my dad say was, "Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to let you know that I accepted Jesus." And walks out the door and slams the door. And I go running to the window, weeping my eyes out and seeing my dad drive away. And I didn't see my dad for a little while after that, not too long. But it was a tough thing. And as a kid, I didn't understand what this was all about, and to deal with that and to think back to think back on it, even as a little kid, to feel devastated, to get your hopes up, to be excited by the sound of Papa coming home, Pa coming home, and to have that ripped away, and to have to again find solace in the arms of your mother and not understand why Pa left again. Years later, my we're at home, and it was around Christmas time. It was 1988, and we're in Michigan by this point. Again, a farmhouse, beautiful farmhouse out in the countryside, and we're listening to music. I don't know if we were listening to Stephen Wiley rapping for Jesus or what it was. I think it was. If people don't know it, we're Stephen Wiley rapping for Jesus. I think it might have been from his Bible Break album. I think he was the first Christian rapper of all time, Stephen Wiley. He's rated highly, and he raps to a T. That is, he's like one of those guys that's like Bible Break, like that kind of era of rap. But we're listening to him on the record player or something, or cassette tape, and we're all jamming, right? Me and my sister. My dad and my brother had hopped in a car, and they went up the road, about 2 miles up the road, to go get their haircut. We had a hairstylist in a house. We'd go to her house. She had a really nice place, and she'd take care of the hair and stuff. And my brother was with my dad. It was snowing and stuff, and I remember we were so happy, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and we're all dancing around, me and my sister, and we're having fun, being goofy and eating ice cream and stuff. And the phone rang, and I remember looking over and seeing my mom. And I remember all of a sudden she dropped the phone. And I remember her screaming for us to get in the car. And we all ran to the car, and we get in the car, and she's driving so fast. I'd never been in a car where someone's driving this fast before. And I'm scared. And my mom turns around, and she sees that I'm not wearing my seatbelt, and my mom screams at me, and I don't even understand why. She screams. Her eyes are like filled with this fire, and she goes, "Put on your seatbelt," like this. And I'm like, ah. So I hurry up and put it on, and we get to this place, and there are cop cars and ambulances all over the place. My brother and my dad, after the haircut, my brother and my dad, they got in the car, and they were really excited. And it's kind of messed up a little because my brother's haircut truly sucked. he got his haircut to be like me. And that was back in the day, man, of like, Mac Tonight and stuff on TV, and the spiked haircuts that were way too tall to be spikes, it really looked stupid. But for some reason, people thought that was cool. So he wanted to look like me. And he went and he said, "I want a haircut just like Jeremiah." And his name's Isaac. And he got his haircut like me, and they were so happy. And when they drove there, it was cold. It was winter, right? Mm-hmm. And they get there, and while they're there, it starts snowing, and the snow is wicked bad. And my brother, when they get out, they're so happy about this and talking how excited they are to get home and to show me his haircut, to show that he's like me, that they got in the car and weren't really thinking. And the snow was coming down pretty heavy by this time. And they're driving and they're having fun and just talking casually, my dad and my brother. And all of a sudden, as they're driving, a truck backs out of a driveway right in front of them. Now, this is a road that's about 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. And my dad sees this truck, the truck doesn't see him, backs out. So my dad real quickly swerves around the truck and successfully makes it, right, around the truck. The problem is, he's now facing a telephone pole. So he turns as fast as he can. So he turns to the left, turns to the right. And by the time, and he's driving one of those little Hondas, those little real small cars. And he turns around, he's driving straight. And there are two headlights in front of him of this massive Lincoln, one of the big old hoopty cars, right? The
Yeah.
boats. And he, in that split moment, realizes that he had forgot to put a seatbelt on my brother. And he looks over to my brother, and they're scared. And he reaches his hand over, and he goes, Isaac, like this, and he puts his hand over. About 5 minutes later, he wakes up. Windshield shattered, blood. And he looks over, and he's looking for my brother, and he can't find him. And my brother is crumpled on the floor, and is 6 years old. And my dad reaches over and tries to wake him up, and he turns his body, and my dad's description says it was the darkest and thickest blood that he's ever seen in his life came out of his nose and his ears. And he was purple. My brother had hit the windshield. His body, little body, went up, boom, hit the windshield right here. Whew, flies back, hits the back of his head, crunches like that, collapses the trachea. Half of his lung collapsed. Blood clot, boom, right behind his ear. Blood clot. But there's no crack in the skull. It's closed head, right? The injury, the pressure is immense. The blood clot, vast. And my brother is dying. And people are running. This is way before cell phones, way before anything. People heard it though, and they're running out to figure out. And the guy in the other car, no injuries. An older man. No injuries. It wasn't his fault. But it was a head-on collision at 45 miles per hour. So by the time we got there, my brother was already in an ambulance, and he was on his way to the hospital. My dad, on the other hand, was there. They were afraid that he bruised his heart because he hit the windshield so bad. We have pictures, in fact, of the car. We've preserved them. The car was just ravaged. I mean, smashed. The whole front is gone. And what's interesting, and I think my dad still has it, is that the license plate said Jesus on it. It was a license plate that was popular at the time. A lot of people in Pennsylvania were getting them, stuff like that. It was a Pennsylvania license plate that we kept on the front. And so you can see it in this car, and the steering wheel was completely bent. Okay. So the steering wheel's toast. The dashboard, his knees had slammed into the dashboard. They were afraid maybe that he fractured his knees and stuff. He didn't, but it was hard for him to walk for a while. It was swollen up. But my brother, on the other hand, was in a coma. And by the time we finally were able to see him, we were already being told that there's a good possibility that he would never wake up. And that even if he did wake up, that he would be in a vegetative state, right, for the remainder of his life, that he wouldn't know who we are, that he wouldn't know who he is, that he wouldn't walk or talk or do anything like that. And I was 10. And I remember being that same kid on the steps. And I'd be that same kid, but this time I'm around the corner late at night hearing my parents cry and argue, but not out of anger, out of desperation, trying to figure out what they're going to do with my brother because the doctors were telling them that they should pull the plug. So I heard as a kid, I heard these deep, heartfelt, painful discussions about what to do with your 6-year-old boy who is not waking up. And I remember going and seeing him, and he had his, his head was shaved, half of it, so I could see the spike on the other side. The other side was still preserved, and I could see that haircut that he got. And the outfit he was wearing was the same as mine. It was a Michigan Wolverine sweat outfit, And I remember we'd go there every day, and I would always sit by the edge of that bed, and I'd hold his hand and just watch him. And I didn't know how to deal with this kind of thing, but it was painful. And it ended up being that in a matter of about 10 days, my brother, one day, we're all talking, and I have my finger kind of in his hands. And all of a sudden, he starts squeezing my hand, like, big time. Now, sometimes people in comas like that, they'll posture themselves, right? There's posturing where you stretch out and everything. But he wasn't posturing. It was just his hand. And I'm looking, I'm like, like this, because it was like squeezing hard. And I look up, and homeboy's eyes are open looking at me. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, everybody hold on, whoa. And I said, look, 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 look. And they're all like, oh my gosh. And so he's awake, but they said he'll never know who you are. Eventually he was functional enough that they sent him to a place called Mary Free Bed. It's about an hour away from my home in Battle Creek, where I lived at the time. And so my mom lived up there with my brother. She stayed with him, and my dad worked from home. We lost our home where we were before. We didn't have money. The family that owned the place was moving Traverse City, so they needed to sell the home. So we had to find a new place. So in the interim period of time, we lived with my grandmother in a small home. And some of the greatest memories of my life, in fact, are with my grandmother. And during that time. And my dad would be gone all the time again. So I'm back to trucker's son, but now mom's not there. Now it's grandma. And my mom is gone all the time. And, it was really painful because we'd go and we'd visit, and my brother, it was very obvious that the brother that remained was different from the brother that I knew. And we had to fall in love with that brother. It's a different one. It's hard actually to even see the kind of the residue of the brother that was there before, because it's so different. He's so different, but he's an amazing dude, and he was awesome from the get-go. Like he was innocent and naive and fun, and not angry, but he had wants and things he'd desire, and he'd look and he'd see, and if he saw it and got his attention, he wants it, right? Yeah. And so he's at this place, and he's trying to learn how to walk again and everything else, and they're not having an easy time with it. So he's in a wheelchair, and he has a trach. So I learned growing up seeing trach tubes and coughing and rags and stuff, even when you go out to eat. And you want to talk about being a kid and not understanding suffering and taking the boo hoo why me thing when you're looking at a kid who didn't deserve, what did he do to deserve that? Right. The unbeliever, Job's buddies. Is it sin? We had people like that. We had word faith people in our life that accused it of secret sins. People that I would have loved to have, pimp smacked in the face.
Yeah,
for no better choice of terms.
Whack,
raging heretics and blasphemers who do not realize what they're saying. And you feel badly for them and ask God to forgive them because they don't know what they're talking about, for reasons that I'll say. But like basically that one night we're sitting around and we're eating some food. There's McDonald's, and I'm sitting on the floor, man. I've got my fries and some chicken nuggets, and all of a sudden my brother sits up out of his chair out of nowhere. Had never done that. So wow. This is now part number 2. So the first one was the squeezing of my finger. The second one is getting out of a chair. And everybody, and I didn't even see it that time. It was somebody else. And they're like, oh my gosh. And you look, and my brother is taking these little steps, and he's licking his lips, and he's going like this. And I look and I see, man, I got a big wad of fries in my hand. And I'm like, you want these like this? And he's like, and he reaches over and finally he grabs them, sits down, kind of crisscross applesauce, and then lays back and just starts eating fries on the floor. But that's the first time he walked.
Wow.
Right. And from that point on, I mean, it was years and years of time of the trials and the tribulations that a family goes through with that, growing up in a home where a nurse is in your home every day. I didn't know any other families that had a nurse that'd be there at 7, and a different nurse at 3, a different nurse at 11. And you would get to know, they become members of your family, basically.
Yeah.
They're always there. And no other family with kids with trachs where, you had to do suctioning and you had to do that. You had a Craig bed and things that way you didn't just wander and get hurt. Mm-hmm. And the coughing, right, where phlegm, we kind of go like this, and it's still in our throat. But imagine if you're breathing through there, and that's where it is. Well, that stuff's got to come out. So where does it come out? Well, it comes out that hole. You got to have a rag. It's very unsavory. It's not something that's like, oh, that's delightful. That is a terrible thing. And yet you have to do this, right? It's not appealing. So you're out to eat, you're out in public. That happens. People, they don't like that. They'll look at you, and you as a kid, and you don't understand. It's easy to look at yourself and to say, why me? Instead of going, you know what? My brother is kind of suffering a little on this, right? Why don't, and does he know to offer it up? And if not, can I work with him on it? Can I offer up the frustration that I get when I have eyes piercing at me, these stone cold, ice cold eyes looking at our family. How dare you? Why are you here right now? You shouldn't be here. We're trying to eat. That sort of a thing. And saying, God, I offer that up to you. But I didn't know. We didn't have a philosophy of that at the time.
Yeah.
And so, more time goes by. And my brother, it was one of these things where kind of the first ideas into how suffering sometimes can make us better. The first times that I really started to understand that, one time in seeing my brother, one time in something that happened with me with my brother. One was the about people who accused it of being secret sins of my family, unrepentant sins that caused that. That's God's punishment on my family. Was my brother. A woman came up. She was Word of Faith, and came up and said, well, the reason why this is happening to your family, the reason why your brother's disabled like this is because secret sins in you guys' lives. And I remember thinking about it for the first time, and I thought, in a weird way, my brother's suffering, God has used in a way that's been redemptive even for him directly, not just for other people, but for him. And I said, my brother is not envious. He's not lustful. I don't know if he would ever be able to steal something. I don't even think he's interested in that. He gives away things that he ought to keep. He genuinely cares about people. When he sees people walk into the house, he's excited. And I said, and that suffering that he went through and that we go through as a family every day has helped us to be better people too. Mm-hmm. And I said, unlike me and you, I don't think my brother runs the risk, in fact, of hellfire. I said, I think my brother, he loves Jesus, genuinely loves God. He's the kind of kid that could be at a service with songs being sung, hymns being sung, and you look over and you see him and he's crying. And you say, what's going on, Isaac? And he just points up. And I said, in this childlike way, my brother, for all his diminished capacities and the influence of his sufferings and what that's opened up to our lives and becoming more familiar with people in the disabled community, and how that benefited us, being at Special Olympics and seeing my brother give away a gold medal to a kid for a bronze that he got. Every kid gets bronze. If you don't win, the kid was so far behind everybody on his lap. He's like, wanting to walk off the trail and everything, and say, oh, I'm out of here, the track. Right. And they have to redirect him, like, hey, get back here. And to see my brother go through this, and I'm like, and I'm now surrounded by people and by families who've gone through suffering. And I've seen how it doesn't always make people better. Mm-hmm. Some people allow it to destroy them. And one of those things that helped me become better in seeing through suffering and how other people were made better via suffering was my brother at Christmas. My brother to that year, I had asked my grandmother to buy me a pair of Reebok pumps. I don't know if anybody remembers those things. Oh, yeah. Reebok pumps, man. That's what I wanted. And so I wanted those. I wanted some basketball cards. I wanted different things. And she ended up getting me like a watch, a gold and silver watch. She got me a sleeping bag, and she got me like this, I think, a wind-up radio or something like that, for like if you're outdoors and you don't have batteries or whatever, you can put batteries in or wind it up. And it had a light on it or something. And I was so upset, man. I was so upset. And I look over, though, and I see that my brother, and inside my heart, I'm like, how dare you, Grandma? Like, I gave you my Christmas list. None of this is on it. Now, all these things are expensive. And she thought about me in them. And they ended up being things I used for years of my life.
Right.
But I saw my brother, and he gets this little nightlight, and it's plastic, and it's a Crayola nightlight. And it had to be like $1.50, man. That's it. Super cheap. And homeboy was so happy and so excited about this. And I thought about it and said, dude, you don't even realize how much you're suffering right now. This is Christmas. You should not be getting $1.50 nightlight. They are literally hosing you right now. You don't understand. You should be getting bigger things, more expensive stuff. And my brother, though, took that nightlight and he's running around showing people, and he's pointing, and he puts it like this to his chest, like he's so happy. And I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed because he was taking something that for other people they could see that as suffering. If I'm taking what I'm dealing with as a suffering, right? It's first world problem. But I'm like, oh, the gold watch, I'm suffering, Lord. Why? And here's my brother who's not, his whole conceptual framework, no matter what's happening, is happiness, is contentment, is seeing the good in that somehow, and realizing that in that little thing, it produced light in darkness. And it gave him comfort when he felt most vulnerable and alone in his room at night. And I thought how ashamed I was of myself. And over the years, those lessons kind of went with me. And I went through different things. I won't go into great detail, but I was in high school, I was homeless. And when I was a senior in high school, I lived on the streets. I graduated as a homeless person. I was told 2 weeks before graduation that I could no longer attend school. As a Christian school, you had to live at home, and I didn't live at home. And so they said, your grades are good enough. You're barely passing. You're doing really bad, but you did some artwork, I think, for a class, extra credit. And so you're going to pass. We know you're on drugs, Jeremiah. We know you are. We know that you're doing naughty things in your life. And now you're homeless. You've run away from home in the winter. And I remember those nights sleeping under bushes. In fact, it was a long time. I used to visit the road. It's Gogwack Street in Battle Creek, Michigan. There was a specific bush near, I think, 27th Street or something like that. That would be where I would stay. There was also a camper that had a broken window. People said, why don't you stay there? And I'm like, yeah, no, the window's broken. And there's like raccoon poop everywhere. Like, I never thought that if I'm on the ground underneath a bush, a raccoon and a dog or anything could come up to me. I at least had some kind of protection inside of the camper, but I wanted nothing to do with that. But to see in that, even in that moment, because my grandma realized, the same grandma that housed us before, realized that I was homeless, was infuriated at my family for not saying anything. And she found out how to get a hold of me, and she found me and said, I want to bring you into the house. She had certain rules, though, and she wouldn't like the cigar I'm smoking right now. But the thing is I get in there, and she tells me a story one night, and I was really struggling with drugs badly, premarital sex, all this kind of stuff. She told me a story about my dad, and how my dad, she came home one day, and the van was out there, and we had what we called the Toyota Tetanus. It's one of those silver vans in the shape of a bullet back in like the 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
But it had so much rust on it that if you were behind it, you had to get a tetanus shot. We called it the Toyota Tetanus, right? And so the thing is that she goes in, she thinks it's my mom. And so she's looking around, she can't find my mom. And then she goes into her bedroom thinking, well, maybe they're outside, or maybe they just dropped off the car and they're doing something. And she goes in her bedroom, and there is my dad on the edge of the bed, and he's bawling his brains out. And she says, Tim, are you okay? And he said, no, I'm not. And she said, what is it? And he goes, I don't know where my son is. And I don't even know if he's alive. And I'm so helpless. And I'm so broken. I just want to hold him. I just want to tell him I love him. And that no matter what, I care for him. And I'll always be Pa to him. Yeah. And I'm hearing the story. And I'm like, I just started bawling. And it was that night that for the first time in 6 months, I called my dad. I heard my dad's voice for the first time in 6 months. Wow. And we talked on the phone, and that night my parents drove in the tetanus, right? They're spreading it all over the place. Everybody's getting tetanus shots. So they drive, and they make it to the place, and we're all hugging and stuff. And that was the night that I had that Moravian, wildly ecstatic and enthusiastic conversion experience. Was that?
Oh, okay.
And I'm falling on the ground. I'm overwhelmed. I'm talking about how God changed my life, and how, that I'm not going back to my old ways. If only that were true, because I did. And I went through numerous other things after that, but this would be the last one, is that, because I went through things like even my family's divorce, multiple times where there were jobs that I had where I had to stand up for what I believed, even to the institutions I was working for, where there was an ultimatum. As a Republican, if you go forward with this information, you'll never work with the Republicans in New Jersey again for the rest of your life. I went forward out of my conscience and convictions and said, I got to do this. And lo and behold, they made good on that promise. I never again worked in New Jersey politics for the rest of my life. Issues where, I had a job at this Baptist church, and the pastor had come to me and asked me to help. The church was literally dying, and by dying it means like he was the youngest guy there, and he was like 68 years old, and everybody else was, Edith and Esther and Ruth and stuff. They were all like, very old, and he was driving up to the elder care home to pick them up in his van and drive them to the church. So there was only the van and one other car in the parking lot. I'm doing a revival there. I'm like, dude, you need more than that. You need more than a revival. Like, you need to break out the old ones, and get this place bumping again for real. And so, but he reached out to me and he asked me to take the job. And I told him, I said, well, I'm a Calvinist. I don't believe in the rapture.
Right.
I'm a theonomic. I believe in creeds and stuff like that. And he said, oh, no problem at all. No problem. It's perfectly fine. So take the job. Church starts booming. I baptized, I think it was like 13 or 14 different people in a matter of about 2 months. I'm preaching on the streets downtown. I'm talking to people face to face. Leading people, new people to the Lord, never been in the church before. So it's not like we're bringing people from other churches and doing that. These are new people. So we're bringing them in and baptizing like crazy. There's a worship team now. Before it was literally CDs. He had his little boombox, and he'd get up there, and this real, he's an older guy, and he'd be like, I remember when I was a kid, we used to go down, me and Ma, and we'd go down to that little brown church in the Vale. And he'd push the button. It was Andy Griffith, Little Brown Church in the Vale. And I'm like, dude, no, don't do that. You're foreshadowing every single time. You're like using the same words to like lead into it. I'm like, dude, this is. So the thing is, like, we had a worship team. We had a youth group that went from 0 kids there to about 15 kids. We had 15, sometimes 20. We had a church that was averaging about 60 people while I was there. And he was retiring, so he's on his way out. I was doing every service except for one Sunday a month and one Wednesday. So I think he did like two services a month. Every other thing was me in the whole church. And one day he comes to me and he hands me a paper by Norman Geisler and says, and I look at it and it's against Calvinism. And I'm like, what's this? And he goes, you need to tell me that you agree with that. And I'm like, I don't agree with that. Norman Geisler? I'm like, no, I'm not intimidated by Norman Geisler. I've met the guy, talked to him actually about this topic, in fact. And so like, I'm like, no, I'm not intimidated by that. And he goes, well, he said, well, if you do not reject your beliefs, you got to go.
Yeah.
And so I, that day, walked out.
So you were a full-blown 5-pointer.
Oh, dude, I was big time, bro.
Yeah.
I was a theonomist, Christian Reconstructionist of the Tyler School. So like the newspaper even wrote about me back then at the time, Battle Creek Enquirer, because I had said on the TV, I had a TV show, a local television show, and I had stated that I believed in theonomic law, including the stoning of people who were convicted of being homosexuals, as well as of disobedient children, the death penalty for a certain degree of disobedience according to the Old Testament model. And so I had stated that on TV. And so the news rolls in, and they're like, so dude, I was taking it to like 2 extremes, homie. I was like way hardcore about it. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And so like I was a theonomist. I was a Christian Reconstructionist, and of a Calvinist persuasion, right?
Right.
And so anyway, but yeah, so losing the job, losing the suffering of being at a college, and it was always Calvinism for a long time, being at a college where fellow students that are angry at you for your beliefs and put signs all over different floors in the dormitory warning people about this guy that worships John Calvin, and he's causing all these problems. It causes the whole school. There's only a couple thousand people, but it causes this crazy chaos. They got so bad I had to flee. The dean of men was like, look, I actually agree with you on like 3 points, but you got to get out of here. You got to go to the sister college up in Canada and deal with it there, and just don't tell people, your beliefs because you're almost graduated. And I get there and people figure it out. They got friends from Dallas, Texas, and they come and say, we know who you are, mister. So I have half a semester left, and I'm given an ultimatum. I have to reject Calvinism. I have to believe that women can be pastors, and I have to take a different stance than I did at the time on the gift of tongues and interpretation and stuff like that. And I didn't. So I didn't get my degree. I lost positions because of it. So whether it was politics, whether it was religion, you have all these things, right?
Mm.
And in each of those things, it was still the boo-hoo me thing. I had no concept still, even to this day. Not even to this day, but even to that day, after all the stuff with my brother, all the stuff with my mother, all the stuff with my father, all the stuff with losing jobs because of convictions and core convictions and standing up for what you think is right and going through suffering and pain, things that you're dealing with in your life, tragic stuff in your life, going through the Navy and getting medically discharged for mental illness. I mean, they diagnosed me as being bipolar. That's why I wasn't in the military anymore. And so, like, all of these things in my life that were like really messed up, but I still had no conceptual framework for redemptive suffering. None. And so all of a sudden, my daughter, now I had become a Catholic, and well, this last story about it, become a Catholic. And my daughter was born a little bit before that. Her name was Samantha, and Samantha Lee. And it was one of these things. She was my mini me, man. Like her personality type, her smile, the goofiness, right, the zaniness, but also the kind of almost weird, creepy seriousness sometimes, like talking about death. And she's like 6, and I walk by her room and it's dark, and she's like, "Papa, you want to know something?" I said, "What's that?" And she goes, "You're gonna die one day, you know." And I'm like, "Oh man." I'm like, "What in the world? Go to bed, you weirdo. Why are you telling me this?" And she's like, "Well, I'm staring outside and I know that the dog is buried out there. And I thought about you." I'm like, "Oh, what?" I'm like, "Look,
Thanks.
I'm like 30, baby. Come on." But she was a keenly aware, even at a young age, of the idea that people suffer and the idea that people will die. And one day I'm upstairs with her, and everything's going great, and we're having a fun time. And I had noticed earlier during skating that she had, when she would go around the turn, she loved roller skating, and I was a DJ, so they could skate for free.
Right.
And she'd go around the curve, and that day her arm was kind of bent, kind of funky, like this when she'd go around the corner. Normally she'd drop real low, she'd have her arm out, she had good form, but this time her arm was like a little baby bird's wing, right? Kind of tucked like that. And it was weird looking to me. And then
Yeah.
she got in a race at the end, and she's stumbling and staggering all around, and she falls down. And she ends up getting back up, and then she tries going forward and falls down again. And it didn't look normal. Something was wrong.
Right.
And she looks up to me and she goes, "Papa," like she's scared. And I hopped over this rail. I'm like, "Ugh." I'm like, I'm getting ready to book out there. And then you can see in her face the grit and determination. She gets up and she goes right back at it again. And she ends up coming back and taking second. She was determined. But about 2 days later, she's telling me about her leg, and she had this bruise, but it didn't hurt. For some reason, it didn't hurt. And she'd been having headaches. In fact, she'd been sick. And she would wake up and she'd be sick in the morning. And I was sick too. I was, we were puking together. I'm sitting there puking, she's puking. So we kept her home from school and we laid her down in the bed. And so we were having like daddy-daughter sick days, and we're watching Super Friends on the TV and stuff together and having a good time. But I got better and she didn't. And we thought maybe it was headaches, because she had headaches, and we thought maybe it was glasses. She was, we all have glasses in the family. So
Yeah.
I was like, "Look, maybe it's glasses." So we bring her to the doctor, and he notices that her eye wasn't dilating properly, but that there's no nerve damage. And he said, "Look, it wasn't urgent. He didn't have a sense of urgency, but you got to go get it checked out." And so we we set up a time to get it checked out. And the day before, we had a event scheduled with the doctor, an appointment. But the night before, she comes upstairs, and there's a weird pitter patter in the sound, the cadence of her shoes as she ascended those stairs. And she gets up there and she tells me how excited she is that she had learned to write with her left hand. Now, she was a really artistic girl, and she had amazing handwriting. And so she shows me, and it's impeccable. She gets her favorite diary of mine. I have a bunch of them, and her favorite fountain pen that I had. And she writes in cursive and in print, and she shows me. And I thought it was remarkable, but I asked her why. And she told me because she doesn't know how to write with her right hand anymore. She can't do it. And like, it's one of these things where in the moment, you don't know how to deal with that kind of a statement from a kid who's 10.
Yeah.
and you don't know if it's serious or not. And so I sat there and I told her, I said, what are you talking about? You can't write with your right hand. I'm thinking it's a joke, like it's an awkward laugh to it, a chuckle, like trying to reassure myself it's okay.
Yeah.
And she goes, I can't do it. And I said, show me. So she gets out this pen, this piece of paper, and she got her pen. And I noticed that she puts it in her right hand. She grabs it with her left, she puts it in her right, and she's holding it super funky. And she's kind of writing, and it's not making a lot of sense, but it looks like she's trying. And all of a sudden, the pen kind of like moves, and she's struggling. It kind of falls and wobbles. She grabs it, and I grab the piece of paper and I look at it, and it was chicken scratches. I thought it was fake, Dustin. I thought that it was a joke. And I got out my wallet, and I had a letter from her that she had written me that I carried with me for years of my life. And in that letter, it talked about me, and that she loved the way that I talked on the radio. She loved the way that I could make people laugh, and she loved the way that I loved animals. And she hoped that I would never stop doing my dreams because she believed in me. And I carried that bugger with me all the time. And I slammed it down, and I showed her that beautiful, stylistic handwriting. And I said, that is your handwriting, Samantha. Right there. I said, you show me right now that you can write like that. And she's scared. So she puts it in her hand, and she starts writing. And all of a sudden, I look at her eyes, and she's crying, dude. And it falls out, and it hits, and it's like, the sound of that, it's like do like in the movies, something hitting, and it's like slow, and everybody's watching this thing, and the pen hits the table, and she looks up at me with those tear-filled eyes, and she goes, I'm so sorry, Papa. And I looked at it, and it was chicken scratches. And then it hit me. Right eye, right hand, right leg with the bruise, left side of the brain. Now, I didn't know. In fact, it's one of those defense mechanisms that parents have, I think, that when something really bad happens, you really do want to think the smallest thing. And I encourage people to keep doing that. I think that it's God's design that it's that way. But it played out in such a way that when we went that day, we went to the doctor immediately. I told Marv, I said, we need to go now. I was trying not to scare my daughter, but I said, you need to tell Mama we need to go to the doctor, okay? And she said, yeah. So we went to the doctor, and she could not rotate her hand. And she would try, was doing these things where you had to flip your hand, and her whole body went like this, and her hand went like that, flat. And she goes, see, I did it. But I saw that doctor's face, man. And I knew, I don't know what's happening here, but this is bad. And we got an MRI that night, and we stayed the night in the hospital. And I remember going and getting some food, and I saw this sign, and the sign had this really adorable kid kind of doing this, and it was for Helen DeVos Children's Hospital, and saying the U.S. News and World Report ranks it in the top 25 hospitals in the country for 3 different categories. I think it was like nephrology or something like that, urology, and cancer. And I remember sitting there, and I read that, and when I saw cancer, I got scared for other people. And I thought to myself, how blessed we are. I didn't use blessed because I was an atheist at the time. But in my heart, I knew better. I knew that this is a blessing, in fact, that we have this place. Because I said, and I wrote about it. I took a picture. I shared it on Facebook. And I told people, I said, I can only imagine how scary it would be for families with kids who have cancer. That next morning at about 8 a.m, we're shown the results of her MRI. And she has an anaplastic astrocytoma the size of a golf ball in her brain. And it's killing her. I go and we have to tell her. This is so bad of a disease, by the way. Everybody likes to say, this is a rare kind of cancer. All cancer is, in that sense, rare, especially when you're dealing with children. But this one is particularly small, like the number of people, and it kills kids so fast that it's really hard to even study it because kids die so quickly. And so it's like 80% of them, I think it's within 5 years, they're gone. And it's like 85% or something like that. And I forget what the percentage is within 2.5. Recurrence is about an average of 2.5 years. So even though it's receptive to radiation, radiotherapy like hers was, Typically it comes back around 2.5 years. And then it's from that point on, it's really tough. And so the doctor was supposed to tell her, and the doctor, we love them. Okay. This isn't dogging them, but they told us, we're good at this. This is our job. We're going to tell her we know how to do it without frightening her or anything like that. And they were supposed to be there on a Friday. They didn't show up. And they didn't show up on a Saturday. And so I called, and they said, well, they're not even in the United States. They're actually in like Mexico. They're on spring break. And I said, but her surgery is Monday, brain surgery. And they said, well, they'll tell her after. And I said, no, you won't. I said, she's 10 years old. I'm not going to say they got to do brain surgery on you, sweetheart. They're going to do this. They're going to go into your brain. And for 3 days, you want me to not say that she has cancer and to not let her know? You're nuts. And they said, well, we don't think you should do it yourself. I said, well, you should have thought about it, because now you've left me in a place where that's what's going to happen. And I sat on that bed at the edge of my daughter's bed, and I had to look her in the eyes, and she said, what is wrong with me? And I said, sweetheart, you have cancer. Where? In your brain. Am I going to die from it? Maybe. We're going to fight, though, aren't we? The best we can. And I said, I will literally turn over heaven and earth and do everything in my power. Anything. You don't even know, by the way, Dustin, the lengths and the depths that I would have gone. The kind of criminality. I mean, straight up, man, I'm not even lying. I did. The medicine that we did with cannabis with our daughter, it was illegal. I could have had them come and take me away. But I saw what it did to her life, how it completely transformed everything. The meds, that's another story. But like the thing is I was willing to do the things that had to be done because she was 10. And I tell her this. And what does she do? She cries. And she says, am I going to lose my hair? And I'm like, maybe a little. And she cried a little bit, and she goes, well, that's okay. She's like, and I said, yeah. I said, you'll still be pretty. I said, you'll still be the prettiest. You know, you'll be the prettiest bald 10-year-old girl I've ever seen. And she goes, I know you think that. I know you think that. And I know you're telling me the truth about the way that you think of me. And people, I told people about this, but she never asked why. She never one time, Dustin, asked, why me? I did. I asked it enough for her. Why? Why is this happening? It doesn't make sense. There's no point to the suffering, which is hilarious that we cry out why when there's no point to the suffering for an atheist person. It's all random. It's all chance. We woke up to this world. It made no sense at all. And here we are confused as to why there's no meaning about the pain and suffering in my life. Of course. But I'm watching as this little girl doesn't think that way. She's not actually operating that way. And so the point is like, you know, she ends up getting all these gifts and stuff from people. And I remember she wanted to say thank you. And I did a video, and people can actually watch this video. They can see it online at Paleocrat on YouTube. And I'm recording her, and she just wanted to say thank you. She's surrounded like E.T., right? In the scene with E.T., surrounded by all the stuffed animals and stuff. She's kind of like that. It's hard to see her almost. But she got a beautiful smile, and she's all happy. And she said, I just want to thank people for all of the stuffed animals. And I'm recording, and I know that's what she's going to say. And right as I'm about to push stop recording, she says, I have one more thing that I want to say. And I said, what's that? And she said, I want to tell people not to worry about me. Everyone. I'll do my best. I'll try to be fine. For one, I knew that the moment that I posted that it was going to spread like wildfire. I knew that she did not realize the wave that was going to come and how that would impact her future. But I knew it. I knew the news would want it. I knew that already. And they did, in fact. She was on the news within 6 hours or whatever. And so like it turned into this thing in her life. And time after time after time, she would go through very painful things. She would be sad. Sometimes she'd get in arguments with people, and you could see the emotions come out where she'd say, I don't know if I can ever skate again. I want to roller skate again. And they tell me that I can't. And I'd say, look, we can't give up. You're the one who taught me that. I'm like, we'll do whatever it takes to make the sacrifices necessary to do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that in a matter of time, we even told the therapist, we said, only teach her how to fall. And they're like, what? I said, teach her how to fall. If she falls, how to fall, because she's on chemo and radiation, she can break bones. And they're like, we don't advise that. I said, I don't really care. Like, you're going to teach her how to fall. And so they did. They said, okay. And we did investigations, and we found these skates that were really low to the ground, and they had 3 wheels on them instead of 4, so it stabilized, right?
Yeah.
And it was powerful. And I would run next to her, and you can see videos of that where I'm running next to her and I'm holding her arm, and she's wearing my pea coat from the Navy, really thick one. And there's a thing at the bottom that says they told her she'd never skate again, and she did. But the suffering that she went through to get to that place, and the suffering that she endured watching her friends dance around when she couldn't, or to get on a bike, to go outside. Her friends would say, we want to go outside. And she'd go outside, and they'd want to ride a bike, and she couldn't. She couldn't just go by herself upstairs. She couldn't do a number of things by herself, and she had to go to chemo. She had to go to radiation. She had to go to therapy. There were all of these things, taking different meds, all of this stuff. And yet, even when she was sad about stuff, it wasn't a question of why me. And she watched as people benefited from her suffering, that they saw the way that she treated suffering with never give up, keep on smiling. She made a poster that said it, and it became her mottos. She ended up being the Make-A-Wish ambassador, highlighted ambassador of the year in Michigan. And she was there. They had big pictures and banners of her. People were inspired. People on TV, they work at TV stations, had her pictures on their desk. Many people do to this day, to remind themselves. Her mottos of never give up, keep on smiling, and remember, we're all going to die. That idea is the motto of my show, Paleocrat Diaries. I begin and end the show with that motto. Yeah. It's influenced me for the rest of my life. And it was from a girl who was suffering and experiencing something that was extremely painful. The pain that she would go through, the embarrassment that she went through, walking around, people, even when she didn't know, she had a limp real bad because she kind of flopped her foot and stuff. She had a real bad limp. And her hand kind of did this funky thing. And people would make fun. And I remember one time somebody made fun, and my youngest daughter, Teresa Avila Lucille, she sat there and she said, don't you dare talk about my sister that way. She has cancer. And I've seen how people have benefited from seeing the joy in somebody's life, even as they are enduring things that are extremely difficult, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually taxing. And she dealt with it in such a profound way, in such a joyful way, that she could even at the end challenge her own dad on his defiance of God and say, what if you're wrong, Papa? What if you're wrong? What if you don't even know? That to go from the person that says, I believe you, Papa, I trust you, you never lied to me. And she didn't accuse me of lying. She accused me of not knowing. And for her to take it to transform people's lives, and people watch that. I saw people who witnessed her in her life. They when she died, they came to our home. They drove from Canada, from California, from Colorado, from all over the place. People coming over here. Place was packed. The days when she was in the house with a coma, she died right where I'm sitting right now. I made this right here, right now, is where I sit. This is where her heart beat its last time. And so this is where I sit. This is where I do my work. I'm in her heart and in her orbit forever, son. Because I watched as she transformed lives. She blazed a trail through suffering, through pain, through things that you watch as other people are hurt. And what does she do? The same thing as my brother, going and being sacrificial, calling people who had cancer in her last week of her life, to call somebody that had cancer and just to tell them, I'm really sorry that you have cancer, but you're really awesome. And I know you can do it. You can do it. That guy's still alive. She said, I hope you dream bigger thoughts. He's now doing stuff with his life radically different than he was before, traveling around, taking some of those beautiful pictures, memorable pictures that I've ever seen people take. Down in Georgia, his name's Bobby. To see people who were addicted to heroin, who would go, they lived in a pup tent. They lost their kids, man. Lost their kids, a husband and a wife, lost their kids. The state took them away. and parents ended up being able to take care of them. But the thing is that they lived on the streets, and every day they'd wake up and trying to find their fix every single day. And then they saw this. They saw this little girl never give up, keep on smiling as she's suffering and dying. I saw people, homeless people who one in particular, who used to go to the library and hop online on social media. And because it's free, right? And what are you going to do? You're out in the elements and stuff. You go into the library. So he went into the library. And what does he do in the library? He gets on Facebook. And what do they do on Facebook? He ends up figuring out there's this crazy thing going around from the news and all this other stuff. There's like 90-something thousand people talking about it. They used to have a tracker thing on Facebook for how many people at any given time are talking about you. So you have like 90,000 is huge. So they end up saying, okay, so this girl's saying never give up, keep on smiling, dream bigger thoughts, all that stuff. Here I am. I'm homeless. I'm boo-hooing myself every day. I know I can do this. By the time they got there to the funeral, to the house to talk to us about it, and the place was packed. 400 people in 2 days came through this house. Over 400 people from all over the place. Most of them I'd never seen, nothing. Radically transformed by her life, by her suffering, her joy in the midst of suffering, her calm in the eye of the storm. And she did that. And they came and said, look, I have an apartment now. I have a roommate. One day I want to be able to be on my own. But they said, I have a roommate. I have a job now. I've been working now for about 3 months. And every day I thank Samantha, because Samantha is why. And I'm watching this. I'm watching these stories just pour in. Last one, there was a family. On the verge of divorce out in Colorado. Great people, by the way. And they're trying to make it to the funeral. And they do. They tried to get there in time, but they came for the reception. They got here at the time of the reception, so they actually missed the funeral. And they came and they talked to me, and they told me a story. And they said they were on the verge of divorce. Not long. They were ready to sign papers and everything. It was going to be over. And they had some kids. And I don't remember if it was the husband or the wife, but someone's on Facebook and they find this story. They see somebody had shared this story, and that it had this little girl, and she's suffering and telling people to never give up and keep on smiling, to dream bigger thoughts, to remember we're all going to die. It's okay. You should just love the best you can, love other people, and give it all you got type stuff, right? And they're watching this girl. How can she say that? Of all the people, how can this little girl say that? And they got to the dinner table, and I think it was the husband. We'll just say this for the story for now. The husband says, hey, I saw this thing about this little girl. I just want to show you. And brought the computer in and played it. And the family wept, man. And the family at that dinner table resolved that they were going to push through and not divorce. And to this day, right now, they are together. They were at the place to break that indissoluble thing, to say marriage is over, the kind of havoc that would wreak on that family. And this family, to this day, gives credit to Samantha Lee Bannister and the inspirational way that she suffered with a smile on her face to say, this is how we do it. This is how we roll. And this is how we not only survive, but how we thrive. And story upon story upon story. But then, Dustin, she died. She died. She died with a smile on her face. She did. Absolutely devastating. And convicting, because I was so mad when I found her. They told me upstairs, you got to come down. I knew what it was. And I stormed down the stairs like a lion. And I get in here, I scream, get out! And I'm furious. And I got my hand on the rail of the bed. And I'm looking down, and everything inside of me is a fiery furnace. And I wanted to just explode. And I look up, and I'm about to roar. And all of a sudden, there she is. Beautiful in blue, with a smile on her face. In death. I said, yeah, of course you were. Of course, right. Well, I boo-hoo myself for 1.5 years. And gradually I see how the impact of Team Tiny Dancer Forever, to never give up, to keep on smiling, to remember you're going to die, to dream bigger thoughts, how these things, even and especially in the time of great dread, great fear, great, all of these things, to realize it's okay. It's going to befall you one day. Death is crouching at your door. You don't know what day it will come for you. So do your best now. You're alive right now. And to give it all you've got. You're here for a reason. That kind of a thing. And to sit there and gradually to see how I could learn from that and learn from her and learn from my kids who had learned from her and benefited in that way, with that childlike innocence, and how God used that to transform all these lives, and how God used that ultimately to convict me in my atheism, to convict me in my godlessness, to leave me just bare, right, ravaged, and in desperate need, with a limp, walking away, and realizing, and this is the end of it all, is to say it all came back to this thing of Darwin, right? Because Darwin, there's a great documentary about him, and it's about his life, and it's like a dramatized documentary, so it has like stories and it shows dramatization and stuff. And I didn't know that he had a daughter, right? I didn't know that early on, the story of his biography with his family. So he had a daughter, 10 years old. I watched this with Samantha about 2 weeks before we found out she had cancer. 10 years old, gets sick. She gets sick, and it's so bad they can't, no doctors can help, and they have to take her and send her off to a place distant, further away. And the mom assures her, "Papa will take care of her. It'll be okay." But it wasn't okay. And she came back, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And the dramatization has it so that the priest walks up, or the pastor walks up, and he says, "Sometimes the Lord gives and the Lord takes away." And Darwin at this point is furious because she was his mini me. They were really close. She would go with him to his lab. She would do all those things. And I remember my when we were watching, we were doing pillow blankets. It's our family tradition where we get as many pillows and blankets as we can, and we watch something. And that night she wanted to watch the documentary and something sciencey, and so I chose that to watch. And we're taken off guard by this powerful story, and all of a sudden there's a scene where finally the rain's pouring down and the lightning is crashing, and the wife is standing outside, and she's crying out to heaven, and she goes, "God, why? Why?" And I knew then, I said, his daughter is dead. And he's on the ground, crumpled up on the ground. And the pastor walks up and is looking down, and he says, "Charles, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away." And Charles says, "Get out! Get out of here!" And he did. Well, the next scene, it shows them going to the hospital. Or not the hospital, to the church, because his wife is still a believer, right? And he still was too. He was at least going. And he's walking to the church, and he's dressed in funeral black. And his family's there with him. He's got some kids remaining. And his wife was up at the door, and at the door of the church, and she turns around, and she sees that he's coming in slow, because he's got a cane and stuff. He's coming in slow. And she goes, "Charles, come." And he looked, and all of a sudden the church bells, bong, bong, bong. And he looks up, and he looks at her, and he puts his head down. And it's a beautiful scene, tragic, beautiful, where he's standing away from the church, and all the family's at the church door, and he couldn't bring himself to go. And his biographer comes up and says that was the moment that Darwin, it was final, it was over. God, he could not imagine a world where God would allow something to happen to a young girl like that, and it had to be just natural causes with no purpose. He could not accept that that was part of a design, that there was something redemptive that could be found even in the death of his own daughter. And that was the end of Christianity for Charles Darwin. At the time, I said that would be me. I told my daughter, we were bawling by this point. I mean, it's so dramatic, it's so powerful. And I said, that would be me.
Yeah.
And she told me, I said, I'd never go back to church. And she said, even if like someone died, I mean, we're all going to die. And I said, I would never be cool with God again. I'd never go back to church. That'd be done, over. And she told me, she said, even on Christmas Eve, because she knew that even as an atheist, I went every Christmas Eve secretly. She knew this. And she went with me her last year, the last Christmas of her life, she went with me. And so the thing is that, and kissed baby Jesus when she put him in the manger in our house. We're the atheist people with the manger and stuff going on Christmas Eve. So, but that's what's true. And so the thing is she told me, she said, I just don't ever want you to hate. We have family members who believe and you love your dad and your mom. You love great grandma, my grandma. And I sat there and then she just went to bed and left me in that place to reflect on that. And that's a weird thing for a 10-year-old girl. And 2 weeks later is when she got cancer. And 16 months later is when she died. And then about a year and some after that is when I found myself on Christmas Eve, against my better wishes, my worst wishes, I guess, at a place called Sacred Heart. And my wife and my kids up by the door, and me with a cane, because I thought that I was super fancy on a basketball court like white chocolate and I could play against dudes half my age, and I was terribly, terribly wrong. And so I had to go to therapy, and I've got a cane, and it's snowing and it's cold and it's dark, and I'm walking up, and because of me we're late, and all of a sudden bong, 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 there go the bells, and my wife says, "Jeremiah, come on." And I look up for a second and I see that same scene. Yeah. And I thought to myself, and I said, how in the heck am I here? How is this happening to me? And I said, but I'm not him. I had become convinced, and I wish he would have too, that he could have seen, even in the suffering of his daughter, that there was a way to see that even through that, and sometimes especially through that, that there's a redemptive quality that can make you and those around them better people, to transform their lives in ways that for the rest of their lives completely have an impact, that define them, define their work. And I said, I'm not him. And I'm now at Sacred Heart. My kids attend Sacred Heart Academy. We're all back in church. We've been in the church now. You know, it's been, 4 years? And we finally, this year, we passed the amount of time in my life that we passed the amount of years I was an atheist. Because I was an atheist for 7 years. Yeah. And so we finally passed it this year. So I say all of that, and I thank you for allowing me to just ramble. But I just want to say all that just so that people know that sometimes the redemption in the suffering is in the worst kinds of suffering. And in the kind of suffering you don't imagine could be redeemed. Suffering done to little ones, even. Things that don't make sense. And I think it's one of those things that I look at now, and I can imagine that a world where someone says there's no point to that suffering. It doesn't mean I think it's real, but it's easy for me to imagine, right?
Sure.
To say, yes, what's the point of that suffering? There's no meaning to it. And I say, but then there's no meaning to your sadness either. There's no meaning to the fact that you're saying why you. In fact, why are you saying why? The fact that you're saying why, and that it's just screaming from your heart, and that you're feeling that pain of loss, that idea is, in my estimation, proof positive, in fact, that there's a meaning to this. Without it, this entire thing would be a big clown show. It'd be a big clown show. Whoop-de-doo. You know, whoop-de-doo for you, your big random blob of atoms smashing around, chemically determined to be doing what you're doing. You know, you opened your eyes up to this place that's an illusion, and you're not going anywhere. It could be struck, by some kind of, meteorite, and we're all dead. And then the world would know nothing for it. We're a little blue dot in the middle of nowhere, going nowhere for no reason at all. But you feel pain. And the things that sometimes people use in order to try to defy God and say that it provides reasons for them not to believe in God, sometimes are some of the most potent reasons that they have, in fact, to believe. And the idea that they could retain the sadness, which people oftentimes, as much as they want to let it go, people who go through that don't want to face the day where they no longer cry over the loss of the loved one. They prefer that stay because it has meaning, because that person has meaning. And so I look at it, and it taught me to use this in a way that is redemptive, to redeem the time, in fact, to apply those things to other people, and not just through prayer, but allowing it to drive you, allowing it to motivate you to do great works for the Lord, to subject all your thoughts and your words and your deeds to him, to the kingship of Christ, to that great restoration of all things in Christ the King, to say that those things can motivate you or they can destroy you. And if you allow those things to destroy you, It's going to destroy other people. If you allow that to motivate you and to reside in the great tension of that, it's not an easy place. There's cross pressures like crazy. You're going to be super sad and super happy sometimes at the same time. It's weird. Believe me. But if you treat it that way, even your actions, even your words and your prayers and your ideas, the entirety of those things that you commit to that and place in the hands of God and say, God, through those sufferings and through the sufferings that I endure now, that I embrace that same thing. And I say, I want to do that. And to end it all, to say, when we go through these things, no matter how bad it was with Samantha, no matter how bad it was with my brother, I would encourage people to start at the end of it. That if you're going through a hard time, I would just simply encourage people. And I do this all the time with people. I say, let it out. Give it everything you got. And people get kind of weirded out. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, literally growl at heaven. Get angry. Shake your fist. Pound the ground. Get on the ground. Give it everything you've got. Hold nothing back. Everything. Scream. Cry. You're going to have to go somewhere in the woods for this exercise. But don't hold back. Give it everything you've got. And when you're grinding your teeth to the point you think your teeth are going to crack, at that point, reach in, grab that crucifix from your pocket, from the rosary, and look at the man. Behold him and be ashamed. Because no matter what my daughter went through, no matter what my brother went through, no matter what I went through, no matter if people listen to this and bawling their brains out saying, thanks a lot, Paleocrat, you stinking jerk, for doing this to me, no matter what, none of that, all of it, pales in comparison to what happened to Christ on the cross. Period. Period. And yet, it's the most redemptive thing in the history of the universe. And look at how it changed you. Look at how it changed me. Look at how it changed Dustin. I wouldn't be doing what I was doing were it not for that crucifix and that man that I behold. When the priest holds up that Eucharist, we behold that and look at it and realize that's the context wherein you, in your sufferings, to participate with our Lord, right? To say there's work to be done, and he's made it for you too, including suffering. And not to say why me. Not to say why me, but thank God. Thank you, Jesus, for allowing me to suffer with you. And I just ask that you would use it, and I have to trust that you will. And that it's part of a great design, in fact. So thank you, Lord. Okay? And that's what I would say to people about it. And as I said, I just realized I've been jabbering for a long time. I'm really sorry, bro. I'm truly sorry. And your show, I don't even know if you normally go an hour or what, but I have literally been blabbing for a long time. And so, A, I'm sorry for that. and B, thank you. I actually needed to cry a little bit too. I felt I needed to say some of those things. Sometimes I need to remind myself even. And so, thanks, man.
Please don't be sorry. I'm so glad that you shared all of that. Every single word, every single sentence. You know, it's funny. I went for a confession the other day, and I went to confess to the priest. I said, I'm mad at God. I'm angry. I'm bitter. I yell at him. I weep and ask why and scream at the top of my lungs in my car at God. I'm so angry. And he actually told me, be careful of confessing that, because what you just said mirrored what he said. Mm-hmm. He said, any true relationship, whether it's your spouse, your good friend, whatever, if you have real emotions, are you going to hold those back? Or are you going to express how you feel? Are you going to be raw and real with that person? Well, if that's how we are with human relationships, how much more applicable to God? So don't feel bad about that. I mean, look at David in the Psalms. Half of the Psalms are David asking why. He's crying. He's upset. He's mad. We got the whole spectrum of emotions in that. And that was a man after God's own heart. I just
Prophet
want,
Jeremiah, the weeping prophet.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, he's sitting there. Why, God, are you doing this to me? You're giving me words, and it's not. It's taking too long to come back, and people are coming at me, and I'm stuck in mud and stuff. you know,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So many, so often.
And there's a little story that a good friend of mine, Mark Kowalski. I just want to give him a shout out. Um, he told me a story. So this guy, it's a short one. The guy's suffering, and he asked God. He said, why give me this cross? He said, give me a smaller one. Give me something else to take this away. So God brings him to a room, and it's filled with all these crosses, rugged, heavy, you know, nails strewn about, you name it. The worst, most raggedy, rugged looking crosses that you can imagine, gigantic ones. And God says to the person, he says, my son, you have a cross, but you can take anyone in this room. And he's looking around. These don't look very good, right? I don't know which one to pick. But off in the distance, he sees, amidst all these crosses, he sees this tiny golden cross. And he says, God, I want that one. I want that tiny golden cross. I don't want these ugly, stinking, humongous monsters. I don't want those. Give me that little golden one. He said, my son, that's the cross that you already have.
Mm-hmm. Woo, buddy. Oh, true.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's easy when look, we could say to somebody, offer up your suffering. Other people have it worse, which is objectively true. But when you're in the midst of something, sometimes it's hard to think about anything or anyone else. And we shouldn't discount how we feel, you know. That's real. That's part of being human.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at Christ in the garden. He asked this cup to pass from me. He cried on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? If he's the prototype of our life, of our humanity, if God incarnate went through that,
Mm-hmm.
who are we to think that we can get to the resurrection any other way but through the cross in the same way?
Yes.
So this is a good reminder for me. I'm so glad that you came on, because I've been struggling with some stuff too. And this really helps me put it into perspective and reminds me of the great value that suffering has when united to the suffering and the merits of Christ. You've shown how the example of your daughter and her life transformed the lives of people that you didn't even know,
Yeah.
in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. So I know I said it before we went live or whatever, but I just want to say again that I'm so sorry that you lost her in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so sorry for your loss. But um, I just want to ask Samantha to please pray for us. Pray for all those who are suffering. And I bet you she has a unique ministry to pray for those who have cancer and whose families and loved ones are affected by those with cancer. So we ask you, Samantha, for your prayers. And we know that in Christ, those prayers are powerful. The prayer of a righteous man or woman availeth much. How true.
It's true.
So, my brother, um, before I leave, before we call it quits for this evening, um, where can people find out about you? And you're on several platforms. So, how can
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
find you?
The empire is expanding. So the more it expands, the more the Kaiser's all over the place. You'll find me more and more. But as for right now, as for right now, The main places, Meaning of Catholic. I'm there every Wednesday and Friday at 11 ish. Kaiser Standard Time is what they call it, and so it's around 11 or something like that. But every Wednesday, Friday, and every Monday, I'm over at Reason and Theology. I'll be making more videos throughout the week. I'm working with some a buddy of mine behind the scenes to begin doing bigger things at the website, where we talk, because the main thing we talk about is stuff like this, right? So
Yeah.
suffering, I'm writing a book about it right now. It should have been done a while ago, but I'm at the end. I mean, it's like literally, it's entirely my fault. It's not anybody else's. It's not. It's just Jeremiah. So pray for me about it. But a book about it called "She Danced Me a Story." It's written like a novel, but it's what you heard tonight, and with a lot of other stories that you have not heard. Um, and you'll be able to find information about that, of course, paleocratdiaries.com. You can see Paleocrat on the screen there, Paleocrat, paleocratdiaries at Gmail if you want to email me, or if you want to be really cool and you'd like to communicate more directly, get a Telegram, the app. It's free. And if you don't want to get another app, then get rid of like 3 or 4 or 10 that are on your phone. I know you can do it, and you can just download that one. You'll be able to, you can send videos, mp3s, pictures, pdfs, links, of course. Do live chats with people. We do live chats like 4 or 5 times a week over at the Wolfpack chat on Telegram. So all of that stuff's connected. You can find that at Paleocrat. But we'll be providing a lot of resources at the .com. We'll be providing a lot of resources there. So if you want to be part of the community of people that are really pretty tight knit, and Samantha's a big deal to the group, that if you want to be part of that, make sure to find us on Telegram. And if you are interested more in the show and resources connected with that, we're going to be doing that at paleocratdiaries.com, talking about enthusiasms, talking about cults and heresies and all sorts of things. We're going through all different things. We went through Jehovah's Witnesses, the introduction to Jehovah's Witnesses today. We've talked recently about the Word of Faith movement, stuff to do with that. Charismatic chaos to do with the revivals in different places, particularly Toronto and Pensacola, the Laughing Revival and stuff like that. And talking a lot about different groups throughout history and what we can learn from those groups as to why we don't do that and what to do to avoid being trapped and locked into that, because it's a cycle. And so those are ways to find me. Those are ways to find what you're looking for. Of course, I have a Patreon. You can find me there, Paleocrat Diaries. And if you're interested in some of my writing, there's a couple articles that you can find. One about my daughter, To Live and Die Beneath the Waves, and lessons I learned from the sea when talking about death and my daughter, stuff like that. It's poetic but beautiful. And then I've got one on a Rorate Mass called The Blinding Light of Darkness. And then I've got a number of them about sedevacantism at 1 Peter 5. So the empire's all over the place. It's spread around, but we're getting that hub, right? We're getting honed in. So paleocratdiaries.com, Telegram, that would be Paleocrat at Paleocrat for the channel, at Jeremiah Bannister for me, and at the Wolfpack chat, one word, for the group with the live chats and all that and everything else. So that's how to get connected with me, my work, my family, and the show.
Beautiful. Well, make sure, to all my viewers and subscribers, make sure you support Jeremiah and what he's doing, because it's truly remarkable. And for those who are watching this who aren't familiar with me, who are in Jeremiah's network, my podcast, Holy Smokes, Cigars, Catholicism, and Conversation, is the impetus that started it is actually temple theology, and showing how Catholicism is the restoration and fulfillment of the temple in Jerusalem. Everything from Marian devotion to the Eucharist to the papacy. I also deal with spirituality and apologetics and issues in the church. I've got some exciting upcoming shows. Scott Hahn on the 15th of this month, Matt Fratt on the 16th. I'm going to be on Meaning of Catholic with our buddy Timothy Flanders, sharing my testimony. So we've got some exciting things lined up as well. So please, if you would be so kind as to subscribe to my channel, I'd greatly appreciate that. And I think we'll close out the show. This was episode 60, The Catholic Approach to Redemptive Suffering with Jeremiah Bannister, aka the Paleocrat. So guys, I just want to encourage you to share this video far and wide, and make sure that you have a box or several boxes of tissue while watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have three small daughters, and I can't even begin to imagine losing them.
Yeah.
I just can't. It's not even on my radar. I can't
Yeah.
compute. So God bless you, my brother.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you. I love you for the sake of Christ. I love your
Yes.
daughter.
Yeah, man.
So, guys, everybody be safe out there. Be blessed. I'm going to end the broadcast now shortly. I'm going to do a countdown from 3. Just a fair warning. It's freezing out here. I'm frozen. So my hands are a little bit slow. So it might take me a bit to sort of get my cursor to end broadcast. So we're going to end the broadcast in 3, 2, 1.